Welcome to the Pop Docs Podcast. My name is Joseph. I am a doctor in degree only.
And I'm Deni, and I'm a doctor in name only, and we're diagnosing the state of pop culture.
We are the Pop Docs, and our clinic is now open. Welcome, dear listeners, to episode 6 of the Pop Docs Podcast. I am Joseph. I am one half of the Pop Docs, joined by my sister Deni, the other half of the Pop Docs. Deni, how are you doing today?
I am doing awesome. Hello, everyone.
We are here to talk about Twisted Metal. Mainly, you've been wanting to talk about this show since it debuted. And so we are going to talk about Twisted Metal because you are very high on this show.
Oh, I love this show.
Yeah, I know you've been excited to talk about Twisted Metal. So we're going to definitely talk about Twisted Metal. That's going to be the main topic of this particular episode. But before we get to that, we'll have the bleep we found on the internet. For those that have listened to prior episodes, this is probably not surprising. It's going to be heavily focused on Wheel of Time because we are just several hours away from the debut of season 2 of Wheel of Time. And I think, just to kind of foreshadow that particular segment of the episode, I think Amazon's doing a better job of marketing this season. It took them a little while, it felt like to me. I mean, it's really ramped up in the last month, but I think they're doing a lot better job this go around with this season than they did the first season. And maybe some of it was also COVID, because I know we're still kind of on the tail end of COVID. But anyway, we'll talk about Wheel of Time predominantly in our bleep we found on the internet segment, which will then lead us right into talking about Twisted Metal, or at least maybe not lead us right into it. We'll try and segue, drift our way into the talking about Twisted Metal. And then after Deni goes off about how excited she was to see Twisted Metal in all of its live action glory and CG glory, we'll go ahead and have our indie bookstore shout out and close with the books we are reading. And for listeners that follow us on our YouTube channel, you may know, as another little bit of foreshadowing, Deni finished The Shadow Rising. Woo! She did it. She's threw $4 to the Wheel of Time. So we get a new book, presumably, that she's reading. I assume that she is still reading, that she wasn't beaten down by the small print and the length of The Shadow Rising, and she's moved on to some other literary pastures. So we'll get an update from Deni on where she's at in her literary journey. I keep occasionally getting, I think you're my only friend or acquaintance or whatever it is on Goodreads.
Goodreads, yeah.
So periodically, maybe it's like weekly, I get an email that says like updates from Deni on Goodreads. So I don't know if you're actually updating this or it's just spitting out like the last thing you did whenever that was, but presumably you are reading other things other than Wheel of Time.
I am. It will send those emails every time like one of your friends finishes a book and they mark it as like read. So yeah, that's probably what you keep getting.
Well, I
apologize.
Fairly regularly. So either you're reading really small or really not small, really short books, or making good progress.
That's fair.
It's anyway,
short.
Yeah, let's dive into past our long intro here to the bleep we found on the internet.
Woo!
Wheel of Time season 2. We've been talking about it on our YouTube channel and our different podcasts for months now. We are huge fans, very excited. We were, I think, middle of the road in terms of our rating of the first season. I think I was a 6 or a 7. I can't remember exactly what you had rated it, but I think it was around there. I think we were about
probably
even with one another and thinking about how effective and how good the first season was. Mm-hmm. But everything so far, from my own perspective, has looked great for the second season. A lot of changes coming from moving from book to TV to television, but I think the spirit of The Great Hunt, and to a certain extent The Dragon Reborn, are there, or at least have been depicted in the shows we've had.
Yeah.
And now we have 4 clips to keep us going until tomorrow or Friday, depending on where you live in the globe and whenever Amazon finally decides to release this stuff. So before we jump into Twisted Metal, get your thoughts on each of these clips, and we'll try to go in sequential order as to how they were dropped, if I can remember them correctly. I probably should have written these down. But the first one was Logain and Rand sharing a scene together. We think, a lot of people think in the community, this is in Carien, because Rand, I believe, is in Carien to begin the season. And it does seem like from some of these different clips that there is going to be a time jump here. Because I think even in this scene, Logain tells Rand he remembers him from a few months ago when the Aes Sedai were parading Logain through the streets of Tar Valon. But essentially, Rand is clearly there wanting to talk to Logain about being a channeler, but he's still a little anxious and not sure if he really wants to engage this crazed man in a bathrobe and a bowl of soup or a bowl of cereal or something that he's delicately sipping from. But then Logain jumps in and tells him, I know exactly who you are. I saw you in Tarvalon when those women were parading me through the streets.
Bitch, I know who you are.
Yeah, I saw you up there. I saw you had this glow. And it was the most fantastic glow I've ever seen on someone that can channel. Then it's interspersed with that scene from the first season where he's being led through the city in this cage. And then you see Rand up there with his curly, bushy hair. And the glow, it's barely distinguishable from his pallid skin. It's just this faint aura around his upper body. So that was one of the things that I was like, okay, I mean, I see it, but it's not really aligning with the way that Logain's describing it, but whatever. My bigger nitpick with this, first of all, I guess I should say, I'll give you my impression, then I'll turn it over to you. One, I think his name's Alvaro Morte, the actor that plays Logain.
Oh, so
captivating.
fantastic.
Oh my gosh, he plays this character incredibly well. I love him. He was my favorite part. My favorite part of the first season. I mean, my favorite episode was The Dragon Reborn, the fourth one, centered around him. So I'm glad he's back. He's still looking great. He's still giving it his all. I love the menace and the madness, but there's kind of a playfulness to him as well, I think. And I just love how he is able to kind of straddle all these different lines of this character.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he figures out who Rand is, or at least he knows Rand's a Chandler. It's not clear if he knows that he's actually Luce Theron Reborn. But then finally, Rand is convinced, and he asks him, what's it like? And then that's where we get the trailer shot of Logain just kind of staring off into the middle distance with this just vacant look in his eyes. He's holding his spoon over his bowl, and it cuts. So I really loved the stakes. I loved the setting. I loved the acting. Again, my only nitpick with this scene was the way it was shot and then depicted in the first season of The Parade, and then Logain laughing because he mentions in this scene in season 2, he was laughing at Rand.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I will stand by this. That is not how that scene played out in season 1, because a lot of that scene was focused on Matt, because Matt's kind of descent into darkness due to the influence of the dagger. And yes, we had the Logain laughing, but it was, in my view, really centered on Matt. So first of all, it looked like Matt was perceiving the laugh. And then there's a point where Logain stops laughing. And he's just kind of laying back in the cage, looking in the opposite direction, mute. And the way it's shot and depicted, I think that the implication was that Logain was not actually laughing, that Matt was hallucinating that as part of the effect of the dagger. Now, that is obviously not the case according to this scene. So to me, this is a retcon. I think I don't know what the idea was here. I think maybe it's a bigger than a nitpick, but that was the only thing that annoyed me about the scene. It was like, that is not how it was portrayed in the first season, in my view, that Logain was actually laughing at Rand. I didn't even get the impression he was looking at Rand or addressing Rand, and he wasn't laughing. Anyway, so yeah, I liked it a lot, mainly because I like the actor of Logain.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts?
Yeah. I agree that I think the actor who plays Logain stole this scene, in my opinion, but I think I told you at one point that he steals every scene that he's in because he's just such a phenomenal actor. And I don't even think it's the writing for him. I think is even that mind blowing. I think the actor just has such a fantastic presence and really brings that character to. He plays a really great crazed male magic user who's gone crazy. He does a great job at it. And so I think he's just fantastic, and I hope we get to see him more since he shows up a couple more times in the later books. I hope we get to see him a little bit more. And maybe I would be okay if they elevated his character a little bit outside of what the books kind of, mind you, I've only, read to the 4th book. So not sure what happens past that, but I think I would be okay if they kind of elaborated his character a little bit in the show.
Well, I can tell you they already have. I mean, you're up to book 4 now.
Yeah.
And so outside of the parade through Camelin in the first book, you don't see a whole lot of Logain.
Now you see him at the tower a few times.
Yeah, literally in passing as he's walking by, kind of depressed.
And then they take him with them when they leave the tower. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So far, he's had, I think, a bigger role, and I think they're going to give him a larger role going forward. I
Mhm.
hope this is not the only time we see him this season. Hopefully, I don't know how you'd work it in, but hopefully we get more than just this one cameo.
Yeah.
Because you're right, he's captivating.
So great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he just plays it so well. Another fan favorite certainly is Nynaeve. Nynaeve?
Nynaeve.
You
I
and I
say
keep going back and
Nynaeve.
forth on all these pronunciations. Everyone knows who we're talking about. One of the best characters, I think, in my view, too, from the first season. Again, another home run in the casting, and
Heck yeah.
oh, I'm trying to remember her name, and I just had it; it just escaped me. The actress that plays 90, but she's wonderful. She is the character, I think, portrays character as like she's ripped from the page. But this scene we got is her preparing to do her accepted test. I was just excited mainly because we got to see a different part of the tower. Presumably, this is in the White Tower somewhere. And I'm like, yes, a new room in the White Tower. I guess the budget did go up a little bit for season 2. I mean, it's a pretty barren room. I mean, it's a stone room, kind of looks like a cave, and there are the 3 arches. For those that have read the books, the Terran Real that are used for the testing. And she's there with Sheriam, with Leandrin, and with an Aes Sedai I don't recall from the first season. I think she's a new Aes Sedai, and I'm not sure who it is. But the 3 of them are there to facilitate the accepted test. And this is a fairly, in my opinion, lengthy clip where they're doing a really big exposition dump about various things.
Mhm.
And mainly, what is a Terran Grial? Which is, I think, is actually an important thing. I did like this. So it's very exposition dumpy, and it started to feel like it went in a little long. I think that's only because I know what a Terran Real is. I know what she's about to do, being a book
Sure.
reader. So I think this is helpful for non-book readers to get this background, because we got a little bit of the Sa'an Real in episode 8 of first season. So I think it is important to inform readers what the hell is a Terran Real. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's very tense. All the 3 Aes Sedai are very solemn, very
Mhm.
serious. Leandrin has incredibly piercing blue eyes as she's telling Nynaeve, you have to do this for yourself, because if you don't, you'll fail, and we'll never see you again, or you'll be burned out, or we'll throw you out, or maybe all 3. I guess you can't do all 3 if she just disappears. But anyway, it was interesting. I mean, not a lot happening. I thought it went on a little long. The one thing I will say before I turn over to you that I do like is it really seems like, and I think I mentioned this on one of the YouTube videos where I was talking about reacting to either the trailer or something from a few weeks ago. Leandrin seems to be fulfilling a role, or having a big role in like each of the girls' training. So there's seemingly she's training Egwene at one point. She's part of this accepted test. And so she is alongside each of these girls. And so I think that's really important because of what's going to ultimately happen. And the heel turn that we see from Leandrin. I'll spoil it. We've been spoiling this when she betrays them to the Shanchan. So
Yeah.
I think by accentuating or emphasizing her role, or expanding her role with particularly Egwene and Nynaeve in the early parts of this season, which is I think is what they're doing, I think really is good. I think it really adds more emotional weight to what ultimately Leandrin is going to do in betraying them. So I like to see. I still like seeing. Well, first of all, the actress is great too. Uh, I guess that should just be a blanket stunt. I think even you said one of the highlights of the first season was the acting. I mean, everyone
Mhm.
just seems to bring their A game, no matter what the writing is like, the quality of the writing. But anyway, what do
Yeah.
you think about this particular scene?
I agree. I liked seeing something a little bit different and a little bit like nerdy explanation, if you will. And I also just really like this part of like the Wheel of Time lore and the Aes Sedai themselves about how they have to be tested and have to go through these archways. I think that's
Mhm.
always been a really cool part of the story. And so to kind of get like an in-depth explanation of it with like the Aes Sedai and Nynaeve, I think is really was a really fun clip to kind of drop, especially for, the diehard fans of the series. But the whole time I was watching it, coming off of having just read The Shadow Rising, I was
Mhm.
like, Leandrin, I know what you do. I know what you do, Leandrin. I was like, "You backstabber!"
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I had that in the back of my brain the entire time.
The third clip was sexy time on a cliff between
Sexy.
Rand and a new character, Celine, who, spoilers, we know as book readers is Lanfear. And I believe that Amazon has updated on the Wheel Time page some of the character synopses, both for existing characters and new characters. And I believe for Celine, it refers to her as an innkeeper in Carien. And that starts a relationship, a no strings attached relationship with Rand. So this is part of the time jump. They clearly have a physical relationship of some level because in this clip, they're talking and overlooking a cliff. Rand loves hanging out with women in cliffside locales because he had the cliffside discussion or conversation with Egwene in season 1, and now here he is with Selena on a different cliff in a different part of the world, talking with her, and she's caressing his pecs, and they're both looking off into the distance. And Celine is talking to him about power, and you know,
Thanks.
oh, she's got her hand is just resting on his chest
Yeah, it's
in a
really
very
great.
intimate kind of position, and she's talking to him about power and seizing power. And so in that sense, I thought, this she was channeling the book character because through the whole great hunt, Selena is just whispering in his ear, like, you need to seize the horn, you need to blow the horn, you need to accept your position in the history of the world and take control, take power, seize power. And so so she's kind of doing that in this scene, and essentially compels Rand to decide to kiss her. And so that's kind of how the scene ends. They're left standing together, kissing one another, and embracing one another on this particular cliff. Your thoughts on this particular scene?
I mean, it wasn't like the most. I think it wasn't the most like intriguing scene. It introduced a new character, which I think is always fun to see, especially a character like this, who happens to be one of the Forsaken. Again, wonderful casting. She looks like who I like imagined in the books, so I thought that was really
Yeah.
nice. And so, but I mean, and in the books they have this conversation. I think the twist on it was that they kissed, and I was like, "Wow!" I was like,
Oh,
"Wait
yeah.
a
Oh,
second,
my.
no way!"
Rand
Which
only
just
thought about in the books.
which makes, Rand just a promiscuous gent. So, I guess he got over Egwin pretty fast. Yeah. I am looking forward to how they show, how he travels the portal stones.
I don't
Um,
think they are.
it, which would be such a bummer because that was such like a mental flip kind of
Mhm.
storytelling in the books, which I kind of enjoy because I like those kind of odd, uh, you know, things in fantasy
Yeah,
books, but that would be cool, but that would
I think this
require a lot of
scene and the description of Celine confirms we're not getting the mirror worlds and the portal stones.
bummer. I like
I mean,
those.
because obviously in the Greyhound, that's where they meet is in
Yeah.
a mirror
Mhm.
world,
Yeah.
and so I just get, maybe to them it's redundant because they have
Sure.
I'm like the ways,
Yeah, I
uh,
can see that.
and then presumably, actually I won't say because I don't think they've gotten to it yet in the book series, but there's another mode of getting around that comes into being later on in the book series, which
Mhm.
I presume if they go far enough in the television series, they'll do.
I'll
Well,
tell
I
you to
guess you kind of you actually okay. I take that back. You see at the end, so they learn how to travel,
Mhm.
which is what Rand essentially does at the end of the Eye of the World book. So I guess it's not a spoiler,
Yeah.
but this is so down. I can't. I don't know if I can't remember if they do it in the Shadow Rising. You can. Were they? Did they learn to travel in the Shadow Rising? Did they relearn? I guess relearn how to do it because it's a lost art of the One Power, and it's eventually
Think so.
rediscovered throughout the book series.
Mm-mm. No, I don't think
And
they have yet in
it
Shadow
becomes just a
Rising.
mode to get them around beyond, okay, they went back to the ways. Oh, yeah. Oh, they need to go somewhere. Oh, they're back in the way. So it becomes like a plot device to be able to allow large groups of people to move about the continent more quickly throughout the books. So I think ultimately, bring it back to the show. I assume if they go long enough, they get enough runway from Amazon, they'll get to that point too. And so I don't know if they want all of these different
Sure.
modes of transportation that might also really confuse non-book readers. Like, okay, wait, we have
That's
the dream
fair.
world, we have the ways, we have a portal stone. And so I think they're getting rid of it. They're just not going to include it, which I know for a lot of fans is very upsetting because the Pearl Stones were the flicker scene that a lot of people love
Hmm.
at the end of the Great Hunt. But presumably you could still do that with the ways, because we now know that one of the changes they made is you could open the ways with the one power. And so maybe in this season they need to travel the ways to get to Falm, and someone convinces Rand to use the one power to open the ways, and maybe you still recreate that flicker scene with the ways. I don't know, but it sounds like you might be disappointed if they don't have the mirror world and the portal stones.
I don't know. It's just another funky thing that I like, especially in the books. I like how they
You want more
described
funk
it.
in this? You want more funk in the show?
Well, I mean, I just liked how they described it in the books. I just thought it was another interesting layer to the world and, kind of the past too of the like
Mhm.
Aes Sedai lore and stuff like that. And so I just thought it was nifty. But I can understand why they probably wanted to put it in the show because it's probably
I
confusing. It'd probably be kind of difficult to bring to life. So I can understand that. Like, how do you interpret that and pay it off? Because it was kind of
mhm.
trippy in certain aspects. But, you know,
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was really cool, and I think it would actually fit kind of in the current milieu because
mhm.
it's really a multiverse.
That is true.
It's a
Yeah.
version of a multiverse theory, in my view. Although there's obviously not going to be crossovers like in the MCU, which has become a headache in many different ways. But
Yeah.
maybe we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll stick it in there somehow. I just think, yeah, it just seems like they're going away from that. But do you like the idea of Celine taking on the form or the role of like an innkeeper to try and meet Rand and manipulate Rand and get him? It's gonna be interesting to see like exactly what she's trying to convince him to do, other
Yeah.
than hook up with her because and start a relationship with her. Because at least when in the
Ouch.
books when they meet, as we were talking about the horn, they're on a hunt for the horn. So there's also this item of power that she's convincing him to go get.
Right.
Whereas they're just kind of hanging. It seems like they're just kind of hanging out in Carrie for a while.
Hmm.
I guess it's a larger question of like what's Rand's narrative thrust in this whole season? I don't know. There's
I
no
don't know.
indication of what it is.
Yeah, that's kinda confusing, you're not really sure what he's doing. Except just kind of interacting with people at this point.
You got a
Um,
haircut, you got a buzz cut.
I mean, I love his haircut, it looks great. He looks a little more grown up and more like a Dragon Reborn, but yeah. I don't know how I feel about how Celine would meet Rand in that aspect. I guess it would make sense. No, not really. Not in my mind. I was like, actually, no. I don't know
In
how
your
I
head
feel
canon.
about that. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. Well, we only have a few more days. Not even a few more days. Maybe one day, maybe 2 days, whatever. We'll see. But it gets us to the fourth and final clip that I'm aware of, unless something's come out since we've been started talking, which is a Shamael in some darkened cave room, rubble, ruin. I don't know where he's at, but he looks like he's communing with someone. His eyes are closed. His arms are doing almost a pseudo Jesus pose. And the one power starts swirling about him and then launches up towards a ceiling and illuminates some kind of seal that I'm trying to remember now. I can't remember if it breaks or not, but essentially it releases the girl from the ring, as we were talking about before we started recording, who is crouching. Turns out she's, I believe, just like coated in blood. So it's the girl from the ring crossed with Carrie after prom. And she slowly gets up and extends a hand, a bloodied hand, won't lift her head. She has long, dark hair that's over her face, like the girl from the ring. And Ashamil is intoning something about blood, a lot of blood, a lot of blood, and then grabs the extended hand, and that's where it cuts. And I assume it's also where it's going to cut in the show, because presumably they're not going to want to reveal who the bloody woman is at this point, because in all estimation, it's going to be Lanfear slash Celine. And I assume they're going to want to save that for later in the season, or maybe even next season. Who knows how long they keep that mystery running. But it's kind of, for me, it was kind of like seeing Logain again. I love the guy that plays Ishamael. I love his portrayal of Ishamael. And so the more Ishamael we get, the better, in my estimation. I thought this was cool. It leaned into the horror elements of the Wheel of Time. And so I'm excited. Your thoughts on this clip?
Yeah, I think this was probably my favorite, maybe just because of the spooky side of it and kind of the horror elements of, again, really seeing the dark side of, well, the evil, quite frankly.
Mhm.
Because I thought it, again, like you said, got to see this fantastic actor on screen again, which he is becoming a quick favorite as well. Um, and also, I just loved how that kind of summoning was portrayed in that, like, blood for blood kind of thing. And then
Mhm.
it's just this creepy, ring-esque, like, girl appears and dripping in blood and just grossness and is like, I'm here to serve you.
Where's
Um,
Red?
but again, where's Lucerne? So, but I thought it was cool. And I think, was this the last clip that we got
Mhm.
so far? Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of liked the series of clips that they showed because it was just a good mixture, I feel
Mhm.
like, of kind of showing what this season will include. So you get to see
Mhm.
like the really dark side of like the evil that's rising. And then you get to see a couple like a new characters, but then you also get to see an interaction with an old favorite like Logain.
Mhm.
Um and then obviously a sneak peek at the Aes Sedai and inside the tower and the testing. So I just think there's been a cool
Mhm.
mix of teasers that got me excited for the premiere.
Yeah. Alright. Well, only a few short hours and we'll get some answers.
We'll see. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
But okay, let's do it. Let's turn it over. Let's satisfy your sweet tooth for this
Ah,
franchise
clever.
and talk about Twisted Metal. I'm sick and tired of that effing clown.
That's a good impression. I like it.
It's my Agent Stone impression. Listeners can't see, but I'm wearing aviators too. I'm not really wearing aviators,
No, no, you're
but so just don't really have a structure to this. Let's just give our general thoughts about the series,
not. Okay.
and then maybe we can talk about each of the principal characters and what we thought about those, and then our hopes if we get a season two. I don't think there's been any word about season two, but
I haven't seen
we'll
it.
s- we'll assume that they're going to get a season two. But
Gosh,
go
I
ahead,
hope
Dane.
so.
Yeah,
With those
lead us.
cliffhangers, they better.
Mm,
Or
mm.
else I'd be really
If
disappointed.
they don't, you'll have to go back and play the game and pretend the game is Twisted Metal 2 is the
Yeah.
season 2.
Yeah.
But go ahead,
Um,
launch here.
Overall
Get started.
reaction to the
Yeah.
show. Um, I personally loved it. I thought it was a great combination of action, but comedy. I thought it brought to life the games in a pretty fun and different way. I mean, they could have taken it just like pure action kind of approach and made it like super cheesy. In my opinion, like super cheese ball, like fantasy kind
For
of
cheese ball.
super cheese ball post apocalyptic. Like it could have been taken there. Um, but I thought they did a pretty good job of balancing it in kind of a real world situation based off of the content they had to work with.
Mhm.
So I thought the interpretation of it was done really well. And I just loved the attention to the characters and the little Easter eggs throughout it as someone who played Twisted Metal 2 like way too much in her youth. Um, I had a blast watching every single episode and seeing like little Easter egg nuggets to each like different characters or the different cars that they were driving. I just I just thought it was really great. And the comedy, I thought the actors were fantastic. Anthony, oh my gosh, I'm terrible with names. Anthony
Mackie.
Rat Mackey? Yeah, I was like,
Mhm.
Anthony Mackie. I thought he was great in it. I thought he was really funny, which was fun to see him kind of portrayed in a comedic kind of element, but still action kind of based. And then the woman who plays Quiet, I discovered she's the voice of Maribel from Encanto, which just blew my
Mhm.
mind. I don't know why it blew my mind, but it did. And I was so excited about that. And I thought she was great. I thought their rapport was fantastic. Um, And so I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the villains of it. Even some like the Sweet Tooth was hilarious, even though he was weirdly casted with like Will Arnett being the voice, and then the gentleman who played him actually portrayed him physically. It was kind of interesting to see. But I don't know. I just really love the show. And the fact that it was 30 minutes, easy to binge watch.
Mm-hmm.
It was great.
And all the episode names, I believe, are modeled off of license plates, which I thought was a cute. Yeah, I thought that was really cute. I like that.
I love that detail. I thought that was so
Yeah,
fun.
that was a great detail. But briefly, my general thoughts about it. My red flags going into it. Trailers seem really cheesy. I think you said super. You were concerned it was gonna be super cheese balls.
Yeah.
I shared that sentiment, especially the teepee, the toilet paper line from the trailer.
Right.
I was like,
Yeah, it looked a
oh, I don't know
little
if this
it
is gonna
looked a
work.
little cheesy at
Yeah.
first. Mhm.
Two, you mentioned the tournament that comes up at the very end. This was a concern because clearly from the trailers, the tournament it wasn't in the show. That this season was not going to be about a tournament. And my recollection from the game, it was a tournament. And this is not. This has been attacked. Other tournament-based games have taken in adapting their to movies. Like so, the most recent the Mortal Kombat reboot. Did you see the recent one? I think it was on HBO Max or HBO.
I never actually watched it.
So it was Mortal Kombat, but it wasn't about the tournament. There were many references in the movie about this upcoming tournament to decide the fate of the Earth realm.
Uh-huh.
And it was all about Shang Tsung trying to kill off potential representatives of the Earth realm before the tournament.
Mhm.
And so it's it drives me crazy when video game adaptations that are centered around tournament don't actually have a tournament. So I think like Street Fighter's adaptations have done this too, where it's not a tournament, it's some kind of geopolitical thing. Tekken, I think, has had some adaptations where they do this, whatever. And so that was another red flag because it was like Twisted Metal, it's a tournament, and you're not going to have cars going around blasting each other for the right to get Calypso's favor. So that was another red flag. The Sweet Tooth thing, I saw the clip. Did you see the clip of Sweet Tooth beating up Anthony Mackie in the casino before it came out?
Yeah. Mhm.
That again, a little super cheese balls to me. Not
Because of the
seen it out of
thong
context.
song.
Yeah. And this was it took me a little while to get used to this. I did not think the physical actors' mannerisms really synced up well with Will Arnett's dialogue with Sweet Tooth. I eventually got over it though. I eventually just got used to it and accepted it. So ultimately, long story short, I enjoyed the show. I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as you did, but I thought it was well worth watching and enjoyed the characters. Acting was top notch. And I'm excited for season 2. As long
Yeah.
as the tournament.
Yeah.
So there you go. So you mentioned Anthony Mackie's journey, the milkman.
Mhm.
So Anthony Mackie, Stephanie Beatriz, I think is the name of the actress that plays Quiet.
Yep.
Would you like to opine on their story arcs? What you liked, what you might have disliked about their story arcs, what their story arcs were?
Yeah. So I actually thought that um Quiet, Stephanie Beatrice,
Mhm.
character's storyline was actually much more interesting than Anthony Mackie's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, completely different, but what I really liked about, Quiet's storyline is that, I liked how they portrayed it throughout the shows. So at first she's just, well, quiet, hence she gets her name. She just doesn't talk. And then eventually opens up. But I loved the flashbacks they did with her. I think her flashbacks really helped to world set a little bit about,
Mhm.
what happened, and then a kind of a look at the different cities again, which I thought was really interesting and cool. And then obviously you see her character development portrays. So she is actually with her brother at the beginning of the series. She runs into Anthony Mackie. They were basically robbing him and trying to loot his car, and then he found them and basically chased them off. And then it flashes to Quiet and her brother. They get pulled over by Agent
Stone.
Stone. Yeah, Stone. Okay.
Mhm.
It's so many characters. Gotta keep them all right. Agent Stone. They get pulled over by him. Turns out he's trying to create this new world order because he's like a law enforcement officer, which is connected to the game. If you're familiar with it, there's always the cop car, which is really fun. And basically they go around just like, well, basically killing people, but also like branding them and getting them to like adhere to this new world order. So he actually convinces her brother to like commit suicide, essentially, like choose one or the other. One of you got to choose for one or the other, to pay the price, basically. And her brother ends up committing suicide to save her. And she basically wants revenge the entire show. She hooks up with Anthony Mackie at a point, and that's kind of her purpose throughout the show. Of course, near the end, her love for Anthony Mackie kind of
wins out.
And then Anthony Mackie ends up helping her still get revenge, though. So that's kind of her storyline. But I really liked her overall. I don't have any gripes with her. Anthony Mackie's character was kind of the same, just kind of funny goofball who's really good at what he does, until the episode Evelyn, which is basically the backstory of his car, which kind of shows you his past and his history and made him a little bit more humanized. But I love them both. I thought they were great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Evelyn's the car that he loves.
Yeah.
And it's his only companion in life until he meets Quiet on the road. This is one of the things that I want a little more is the world building. I don't think it's not integral, I don't think, to the story, other than it just needs to be kind of a post-apocalyptic scenario. I mean, it's basically the world of Mad Max with a sci-fi channel gloss to it, less desert thematics. But it's one of those things where there's they kind of talk about like a power grid going down that then caused widespread chaos or something, but it was never very clear to me exactly what happened that led to the downfall of civilization. But then it's also like Mississippi River West is basically the map that we're dealing with. And so you mentioned like there's these cities, and the milkmen like take stuff between the cities, but there's also people living just outside the walls of the cities, but they can't go in. It's not clear like who runs the cities. Calypso, I guess, runs New Chicago, which is the location I think you'd mentioned that essentially Anthony Mackie's trying to get to. But then, yeah, Agent Stone, not only is he trying to like restore law and order to the Western United States, he's got like all these, they've created outposts or something throughout the entire, this was a little unfathomable to me. Kind of strange credulity is that they had all these outposts, even though we only see one. I think it's like the Hoover Dam or something. And so that was one thing I thought fell a little short, is the world building. I didn't really know what was going on. Anthony Mackie is Anthony Mackie. He's kind of, I thought we've seen that kind of portrayal of Anthony Mackie before, which is fine. I like Anthony Mackie. He's very charismatic. He's a motor mouth, to add a little car pun, to the podcast episode. I actually did. I thought they did a good job with him in this car, and I didn't shed any tears when spoilers, the car gets blown up, but I felt a pang of sadness, and he's starts the next episode carrying the wheel, Evelyn's wheel, steering wheel, and it's like oh it's so bad. I feel for you. I feel for Evelyn. I feel for Anthony Mackie. So I thought they did a pretty good job with that. I did like his relationship with Quiet. It felt a little rushed because their whole relationship takes place over like 5 days or something. And I forgot to do, I was going to Google map how long it would take to get from San Francisco to Chicago, because I think he does it in 10 days, but he does it in 10 days being accosted in every episode by different factions and losing his car, finding a new car. And so I was like, I don't know if they could have actually made this run, but whatever. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about a movie with guns and bullets and rock. I mean, this is a show where there's rockets being fired from one car to another car.
There's rockets being fired. There's power in movie theaters that have been abandoned for Lord knows how long.
They're eating popcorn in those movie theaters. How long has that popcorn been?
You gotta suspend. You gotta suspend time and just
and go with it. You gotta roll with it. Yes. It's like a Fast and Furious movie. Just physics aren't going to mean anything. Just get in the car and go along for the ride. But these are things that like sat in the back of my mind. The episode where they're in the restaurant This is why it's also to me like Mad
Yes,
Max. There's resource scarcity, yet everybody has an abundance of needed resources if they
exactly.
on hand to make the plot move forward. I
Yeah.
mean, they like got gas ovens and stoves and stuff in that restaurant.
Freezers with frozen patties
Yeah.
still that they can make burgers. Yes.
But going back to the world building, because you mentioned, I agree with you. Like especially the backstory with Quiet and her brother. It's also weird that she never actually told him her real name by the end of the series, but whatever.
They're
Um,
probably saving it for a big moment in season 2 if they have it.
yeah, but they're in the OC, and all these rich people
Yeah.
are cutting off appendages and stuff and body parts and using them as jewelry.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, that's quirky. Again, kind of Mad Maxy to me, but what? How does I'm like, how did this happen? And how's this like normalized? Why does it Leave It to Beaver with people wearing finger necklaces and stuff like that? And they never explain it. You just kind of have to accept it. That's the world that
Nope,
they're living
that's
in.
just the world
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. And you mentioned, so I thought that both of them were really good. I really did like Quiet was she was much better when she got to have a personality.
Sure.
And so I really liked her after episode, I think 2, because for the first 2 episodes were really where she's quiet. And then she has that explosion against Sweet Tooth.
Mhm.
So let's switch to Sweet Tooth
Sweet
and talk about
too.
Sweet Tooth. Because and the reason I want to segue is because I loved his one-man show of the hotel concierge
Yes.
video. Loved it. And I
It
on
was so
paper,
good.
I'm like reading this. What did they think when they wrote this? And then when the actors were like, they really think they're going to pull this off. And I think, you know what? I thought it worked for the way they used it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
And
loved
I just
it.
love, and this goes to Quiet when she really finally opens up and just tells him that was awful. He's like, as he's holding a machete over them, and he doesn't give two craps. Tells him
That was
what she
literally
thought.
awful.
Yeah.
I love
So you
I
like
love
Sweet Tooth?
Sweet
Work for
Tooth.
you?
I thought it was so I thought it was weirdly a perfect representation of that character. Because I mean, they could have done a direct just Sweet Tooth, evil clown, you know, he just goes around killing people. Like, he
Mhm.
didn't really have to they didn't kind of like, oh my gosh, the character in American Horror Story that was in the
Yeah, I don't remember. I know which one you're talking about.
yes,
In
the 4th
Circus?
season in the
Mhm.
4th season, which I'm completely blanking on his
Yeah,
name.
like, wasn't his, like, lower jaw missing because he,
Yeah, and
tried
he
to commit
wore, like, a
suicide and he failed?
mask.
Yeah.
Yes, and he wore a mask, and, oh gosh, I'm completely blank and I'm gonna kick myself for this later. Um, but, I mean, he was just, like, straight evil, just murdered people. I mean, he
Mhm.
kind of had a little bit of clown moments where he pretended to be a clown, but, I mean, he wasn't funny whatsoever. He just killed people. So, they could have done that, but with his ice cream truck. But I kinda liked that they did this, like, insane asylum approach. You got to see a little bit of his backstory as, like, a child actor and kinda got to see a little bit of that. That kinda paid off how he came to be who he is. I love that he's, like, the guy in Las Vegas and people don't go to Las Vegas because it's Sweet Tooth. And that just his character was so interesting to me and funny.
Mhm.
And it was great. I the one stretch I think, even though it's a direct tie to the game, is at the very end when he lights his head on fire. Because 'cause I'm like, "Come on." Like, that's
Yeah. "Light me
literally
up, Stu."
it's like, that's too much of, like, ignoring the law of, burning flesh and how you would die from that. So that's a little too extreme for me. I understand why they did it because it's from the game. But that was probably one of the things I was
Mhm.
like, that's a little too much. But, other than that, loved him as a character. Every time he came on screen, I just started giggling, which I don't know if that's a good
Mhm.
thing or what, but I thought it was great.
Yeah, he worked a lot better ultimately, especially as the show went on. I mean, I will say that I think it takes for me, it took a couple episodes to really get into it and just accept some of these things. And again, the one thing it really was tough for me to get over was I just don't think this weird decision they made to have someone play Sweet Tooth but use Will Arnett's voice. And for me, it really didn't look like it synced up well. but eventually I got over it, partially because he kind of fades to the background for a while after his first appearance, and then comes back to the forefront. But I do think I agree. I think not only when you were mentioning he could have become a caricature of other clown murderers we've seen. So I definitely agree with you in American Horror Story, but also I was thinking of a Joker, some kind of like Heath Ledger type Joker, where he's just kind of an anarchist, but he's also violent, and I think he kind of stands out. I think they did a good job kind of making this killer clown unique.
Mhm.
And but I do agree with you. The flaming head, that does, even in the absurdity of this world that they've created,
Yes.
that did strain the limits of the rules I think that they set up. And
Mhm.
I get the impression he's not dead. So I mean,
Oh, totally not. He's gonna
his
come
head was
back.
on fire. He got shot a couple times.
Mhm.
I
His
think
truck
once in the neck
crashed.
or in the yeah,
Yeah.
he jumped onto another car, then got thrown off that car, then ran over, and the
Mhm.
mask came off, and that's kind of the last visage we see. And I believe there is a scene. I forgot to watch and see if there is a post-credit scene, but I saw a clip on YouTube where Stu and Mike, I think his name is, the two guys that were with him, are
Mhm.
like at a lake, and he shows back up like Jason from the Jason movies. So
Oh,
I
I didn't
assume
see
he's
that.
not dead.
He's
And
totally not dead.
that just does take me out, because even in an absurd world like this, there have to be some limits and some rules. I say this knowing full well we're probably going to get Axel in the second season, who is a
Yes.
man that has giant tires for appendages. So
I mean, fair.
I'm probably being a little too harsh in terms of asking for some realism
Mhm.
in that end. Liked the backstory in the sense that they set up like he's being upstaged. He's a child
My
actor. He's being
daughter.
upstaged by another actor, and it turns out it's a dog, and this scars him for life. That everyone loves other people more than him, and all he wants is the adoration of the crowd, whatever
Mhm.
crowd that might be. Uh, and then you didn't mention that he finally gets a fan club, quote unquote, as he goes around liberating all these people that
Very
are
true. Mhm.
prisoners of Agent Stone's various DMVs throughout the West. And he mentions, you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit, which is something that is used by the teachers at your daughter's school.
Yes. Yes. Apparently, maybe one of the writers also has
Mhm.
a little one in daycare that also gets told that. Because yes,
Yeah.
he says exactly like my daughter Lily.
But again, this is if I had one critique about it,
Mhm.
the fact that he's going around and destroying all the DMV. He's a one creature wrecking crew. And it really is like a Jason, where he's like a horror villain,
Mhm.
because he's one guy, and supposedly he is a guy, but he's taking out these heavily fortified installations where there are multiple cops with like body armor and machine guns.
Yes.
And it's one of those things again. So there are aspects of this character where they are really pushing the limits for me, believability. And
Sure.
still need to have some kind of realism even in this ridiculous world that you create. Do you want to see Sweet Tooth in the season 2? Or
Um,
would that kind of annoy you?
no, I would like to see him come back again. I mean, might as well at this point. Because we all know he's gonna come back, let's be real. They basically said it at the end. I wouldn't mind seeing him come back again just to see him how he would be portrayed in that kind. Sorry, I had a piece of Velcro stuck in me. How he would be portrayed in a, like, tournament setting? I don't even know how he would I mean, I think in Twisted Metal 2, the actual game, you actually had to enter a cheat code, I think, to access
Mm,
him. He was like a boss in one of the
mm.
levels, but then you could get a cheat code to actually access him. So I don't know how he would be involved with the tournament, but it would be interesting to see him, even if he's not directly involved, like he just appears during one of, I don't know, like a
Mhm.
end finale or something, and he just like appears out of nowhere and just causes hell and ruckuses just because that's who he is.
He's the
Would be
agent of
funny.
chaos.
Yes, the agent of chaos. And Clips is like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. I just think that'd be funny.
I did think they did a good job with his ice cream truck. And I love, like,
Yes.
the missiles coming out of the clown's eyeballs, its eye
Yeah.
sockets at the
Uh,
end.
the ice cream
That was
truck
cool.
was really cool. I loved it.
Yeah, and then there's the scene in the final fight where He's driving alongside Quiet and Anthony Mackie. What's Anthony Mackie's character? Why I'm blanking on the character? John Doe.
John Doe.
And they're having like a conversation, like, "Oh, I knew you kids would get along and make it." They're like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Sweet Tooth," and
I like the hair. I like the fire.
like what you doing up there? "Oh, thanks. Wanted to try something new."
It's so great. It's just the ridiculousness of those
Oh
kind of
yeah.
things that
Oh yeah.
for whatever reason, I just love sometimes.
So, kind of the final principal character would be Agent Stone, which you've talked about a little bit.
Yes.
Did you like Agent Stone as the villain, the antagonist for this season, the put upon police officer who was trying to reestablish law and order?
I did like him as a villain, mainly because it was kind of unexpected. I mean, you go into this thinking it's going to be, I don't know, Calypso or something, or just some other more ominous being. But then it's kind of this approach of like a cop law enforcement who's trying to bring new world order, and he's actually kind of pretty freaking evil because he goes around getting people to kill each other and brands them and stuff like that. And I thought the actor who portrays him did a really good job too. I thought he was great. His backstory's kind of funky. How he's like this like kind of nerdy, awkward, weird mall cop that then becomes like a cop. I don't know.
I think he was actually a cop, but his like beat was like the mall.
Right. Yeah. That was kind of, he's just kind of awkward and weird. But then he becomes like, he's so scared. And then he becomes this killer who's just in his mind enforcing the law and like creating his world. Which in a sense is creating safety for everyone in his mind. So, I thought it was a good portrayal. I also think it was fun because not only do you get to see him as like the cop, you also get to see they introduce the brother and sister who's also they're actually the cop car in Outlaw in
Oh, were they really?
game. Yeah, in Twisted Metal 2, they end up being the outlaw character. And so I thought that was fun that you got to see them, and I was like, yeah, they were
buffoons. Most of his subordinates were all buffoons and cartoonish and
kind of weird people,
useless.
Yeah, but they killed.
I didn't realize they were. Yeah, I didn't realize they were part of the game. I mean, so as an Easter egg, that's cool to include them.
Yeah, but so that's like that was a fun Easter egg, I think.
I had a few. So I like the idea of someone trying to reestablish order, law and order, whether that's a cop or some other kind of character.
Yeah.
So I like that idea and trying to think about and play with that idea. Wrapped up within that, the idea that he's set up a bureaucracy to try and issue licenses and then enforce punishments for not having a license. So he's got all his installations are like just glorified DMVs. I thought that was really clever and really cute. And also because even though he's trying to do this, he's really not that intelligent. And so like what he's doing isn't going to really work that well. Plus he's got, again, this is what really, that's the problems I started to have. I didn't believe any of these people could actually create this network of DMVs and bureaucracy because they're all buffoons. Again, a part of it goes back to Sweet Tooth. One man with no weapons other than a machete to start with is just wrecking shop and destroying and killing every militarized officer in these installations. So I didn't believe that they could actually create this bureaucracy in this labyrinth of DMVs. And then also his main base is like Topeka, Kansas or whatever.
But even in a post-apocalyptic world where you assume that the majority of people live within these walled, like the smart people, let's put it that way, the smart, sophisticated, well-off, if you will, people are probably within like the new city walls, and so you're just left with a bunch of like rejects and like buffoons out in the wild. So maybe in a weird sense it could potentially be established if there's at least one strong like leader who kind of enforces with an iron fist kind of thing.
I'll give you that, but my retort to that would be the depiction we get of the people inside the walls. And we only see him in New San Francisco. For all we know, Calypso's one person living in Chicago.
Very true.
And some disembodied voice in Chicago. So I don't even know if there is anybody in Chicago.
Very
But
true.
but we see Nev Campbell, who is cunning,
Mhm.
intelligent, crafty.
Yes.
Everybody else is either part of the police apparatus there, a law enforcement apparatus, or military, whatever. And then everybody else is under the thumb and basically glorified actors.
That's true.
So we don't really get a sense of like what goes on in these cities outside
Mhm.
of Nev Campbell being manipulative. But I take your point. It seems reasonable. I still don't really buy it. But now your point, the fact that this Agent Stone guy could set up this whole apparatus, they really only
Right.
refer to. But
Mhm.
whatever, go with it. Sweet Tooth destroys
Suspend
it
that
all.
belief, Joe. Suspend
Yeah.
it.
And then
Okay.
they create the Game of Thrones wall with a bunch of cars just stacked on top
Yes,
of
that
each
was ridiculous. I'm sorry. Again, that was a little far-fetched. Just a little bit.
And I love it as as John, Quiet, and the convoy are driving through, like, oh, I wonder if this is a trap. Of course, it's a trap.
Yes.
What do you think? Oh my. Anyway, so
Uh,
that was kind of. I love the portrayal of Thomas Hayden Church. I loved his portrayal of the character of Agent Stone. By the
oh,
way,
it was like
how nice are the roads in the post apocalyptic world of Twisted Metal?
there were
There
some
is no
let me tell you,
impediments.
there were
The
some
upkeep is
great
incredible.
cinematography in that show. Some great, like, drone shots of beautiful landscapes as they were driving, and I was like, "Alright, post-apocalyptic Twisted Metal world. Pretty."
But there aren't cars blocking streets. There's like no potholes. There are no bridges destroyed. I mean, the infrastructure spending in the post-apocalyptic world is great. There,
Indeed.
I mean, I was shocked at how great it was.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the one thing I did like. So let's kind of wrap it up here. Those are the principal characters of the show so far, and so maybe we can wrap it up and talk about maybe our top two things we liked, and maybe top two criticisms if we have any. I certainly have some. I don't know if you do,
Okay.
but you want to start with the critiques or with our favorite things from the show? Do you have a preference? Bad news
Uh,
first, good news first.
I always like to start with the good news first
Okay.
because it
Number
gets me
two,
pumped.
then. Can you isolate two things that were your two favorite things? Beginning with
Oh
number two.
gosh. My 2 favorite things.
Would you like
I
me to go
think
first? I can go first if you want time to think.
you go first
Okay.
because I'm gonna have to narrow it down. I may just generalize mine.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
My number two, my second favorite thing was the convoy. I love the idea of this group of semi trucks
That is
that
cool.
have retrofitted their semi trucks so that they can connect with one another. And they have this whole little almost marketplace
Mhm.
built in this convoy that just, I guess, drives around the United States, gobbling up cars like they're in mortal engines. And this is where we get, I think, Twister. Is that the name of
Twister. Mhm.
the character from the game? She's in the game, right? With the
She is.
Formula One car.
Yep.
Yeah, and Plant Lady. I forget Plant Lady's name.
Flower power.
Is that her name? Was that her name? Who, by the way, apparently is shot in the neck at the very end, and
But
but survives.
survives.
But the other, her co-pilot dies. I did not understand that dynamic, but whatever. She was great. Although I thought she was a little quick to. Okay, real quick digression. Now that I'm on this, drove me nuts that they pull up. John and Quiet pull up to Flower Power's little house,
Mhm.
and she just appears around the corner, scaring the crap out of him. And she has tea. She's like, "Oh, you look parched. Would you like some tea?" And they both
Oh
just
my god.
drink it without questioning. I'm like,
She's
"No,
not like an
this is
old woman.
unrealistic."
Jesus.
Well, she had kind of an old woman voice, and she was got a little tray of tea. "Oh, you look so parched. You've been driving a long way. How about some tea? It's hibiscus tea. It's very tasty. I bet you haven't had tea in a long time. Come on, my dearie, just drink the tea." Ah, I was poisoned. Ha 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 ha. Like, it just annoyed me. I'm like, they're gonna drink this, and it's gonna annoy me. Oh yeah, they drank it without even like questioning it at all.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, anyway, that's a digression. Sorry. So that's my second favorite thing. I love the convoy. I love the concept of the convoy. I liked the production design of the convoy. I like the characters in the convoy. What was the Car Sutra book that the old woman had like made? Was it the Car Sutra? Is that what it's called? I forget
So
exactly what it's
good.
called. And then Quiet had it the whole season, and then she was like putting maps in it and stuff like that and whatnot. So I loved everything about the convoy. So that'd be my number two. Did you come up with a number two?
Number two, I think there were so many good moments throughout the show that I enjoyed. Um,
Isolate it. Isolate it.
I'm trying to isolate it. I would say my number two, if I had to pick a particular like scene situation, would
Scene or
probably.
concept or character, whatever. We can keep it broad.
I mean, I'm gonna keep it to a scene at
Okay,
least,
that's fine. Yeah.
and that's gonna be probably the end when you get to see them all come together and they kind of have that battle mentality from the games where they're all
Mhm.
fighting each other, or really they're trying to just fight the one, but Sweet Tooth comes in and just cause chaos because that's who he is. Um, but I love that because you kind of get a glimpse at what they could potentially do, and plus it connected to the game really well, and kind of seeing all the different like weapons and
Mhm.
stuff and character interactions. So I thought that was really fun to see come to life in the show. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that would be my number 2, is that it because that's kind of what I wanted to see the entire show, obviously, because that's what you do in the game.
Mhm.
So it's like, they have to do it, and then seeing it at the end come together, I was like, "Yes, that's exciting." And then obviously the ending where it's like Calypso putting up their pictures
Whoa, whoa,
after that.
whoa, whoa! You're jumping. Wait, is that your number one?
That's not my number 1.
Oh, you're
I
you're
just like
you
that
trying to sneak in an honorable
No,
mention. What is this?
I like that sequence of events because you see, like, I like that get to see the tournament and then shortly after,
No, no, no. I'm
at the
throwing a
very
flag on.
end.
I'm throwing a flag on that one because when you say sequence of events, that implies that they followed one another directly. There was like 30 minutes of the episode between them.
Yeah, you could, like, ignore the 30 minutes, really, it's not that important.
Oh my god. That's when Quiet demonstrates her love for John by shooting him in the shoulder. Shooting him in the place where you know they're injured but never gonna die. It's that special place
Sure.
that every character with plot armor gets shot if they have to get shot.
Plot armor. Love that.
They
Um,
always get shot in the shoulder. It's like always the same spot in the shoulder, like, oh, it's not fatal, but they're getting incapacitated. So no, I'm
Fine.
throwing a flag on your Calypso. You
I'll
can have his number one.
that, and then I'll keep my yes, my 2 is just seeing the battle scene with all the
All
characters
right.
and cars and stuff like that.
That's a good
Yes.
segue because that's actually my favorite. That was my favorite part was the opening of the last episode because you get Cake, the distance, is what John Doe puts on the radio as they're all revving their engines and they're flicking switches and they're clicking off safeties and all their guns. And Twister puts her Formula One helmet visor down, and you got Cake's music playing in the background, and Sweet Tooth's all lit up, his head's on fire, and Agent Stone's now in his weird police SUV flicking switches, and then the song reaches its crescendo and they take off at each other, and all of a sudden it's that overhead shot of missiles flying across the battlefield and machine guns firing and cars engines revving, and loved it. Loved it.
So
That was
good.
the best part for me of the
Mhm.
show. And I'm not gonna try and sneak in an honorable mention, so I'll just turn it back over to you.
I'm gonna lump my honorable mention into my number 1, which is just
Oh my god. Let it go. Let it go.
I'm gonna generalize my number 1. Which is, I just loved how much, and I already kind of said this before, but I just loved how much like Easter egg nuggets they put into the show in connection to the games, and how if you weren't a fan of the games, you probably would never even see them. And so, for example, and I think I mentioned to you when I first started watching the show, I think it was the first episode when you see Quiet and her brother trying to escape Agent Stone as they're running. They're inside a purple hearse looking
Mhm.
car, and that is Thumper from Twisted Metal 2, whose, like, specialty weapon is, like, a flamethrower at the front of his car, but obviously they don't do that in the show. But just that fact that they had that car as, like, a little hint towards the game of, like, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, look at that's, like, Thumper's car." I just think that kind of attention to detail is really cool, and what makes shows like this like super unique and interesting for fans of that genre and stuff, and the games and the content. So I really love that. So obviously, going back to my honorable mention that I'm now lumping into number one, at the very end when they're showing all the obviously it's Calypso. You don't see him, of course, because he's probably not even cast. But you get to see the back of him, and he's putting pictures up on his little tournament board, and you get to see all the characters that you have seen so far in the show. Like Bloody Mary is another character that we saw. The preacher, who we also saw, who's just crazy and wild. Love him. But then you get to see the characters like Mr. Grimm, who I'm very excited to see because he's my favorite character to play in the game. Axel, and then, just others. And it's just so exciting. It got me really excited for season 2, which I hope they do.
All right. Because we're objective here, do you have 2 weaknesses to the show? I've been gushing about it. For waxing poetic for 40 minutes or so about it.
I mean, 2 weaknesses, I would say, is kind of the idea that we've kind of talked of, like, unrealistic situations occurring periodically throughout it. That kind of would take you out of it sometimes.
So you want more realism. A little more realism.
Maybe a little bit more realism.
A pinch.
Just like a pinch.
Yeah.
Like how you mentioned the wall of cars that funneled them into this area. They could have literally left that out and it would have been fine, I don't know why they had to do that. It's just for a punchline of a joke, maybe, but it was so unrealistic. That made no sense to me. So I think that was probably the biggest complaint in my opinion. Other than that, I thought, like, obviously the characters were the strongest in my opinion. Storyline was okay. I mean, it wasn't like mind-blowing.
Well, and as we've said before in other venues, it's Twisted Metal, so I mean, it doesn't have to be mind-blowing. It's cars with rockets and machine guns fighting each other.
Exactly.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. So I think it was just that main critique of just like sometimes going a little too over the top and unrealistic in aspects. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 ones, and I mentioned them in different ways, or at least by implication. One was I just don't buy Agent Stone and his network of people. I just thought it was, in theory, I thought it was interesting. In practice, I thought it was dumb. Or I guess in implementation, execution, it didn't work out. Mainly because they just, again, really they made Sweet Tooth like super overpowered. I mean, it's a one-man army for most of the show. And then kind of, well, we think he dies, but he didn't really die. He didn't die. So that would probably be the main thing is like, I thought they kind of trivialized a lot of the antagonists. The second thing is I just think some of the characters made really dumb decisions at different points. And one reflection of it to move the plot forward. And one was in this world where they are under threat of being killed or assaulted or whatever every single day, they make the dumbest decisions like drinking tea from someone they don't know. It's so, and there's a few instances of that where it's just like it's almost like characters have to make these dumb decisions in order to move the plot forward. And it goes back a little bit, I guess, to I think there needs to be a lot of absurdity given the premise and the franchise.
Sure.
There has to be some realism also in there at some level, or at least don't diminish the characters by having them make bad decisions or dumb decisions. And I thought just there's too many dumb decisions made. Having said that, rating recommendation, I still give this, for what it is, I give it a 7 or an 8. And I would absolutely recommend it for people that would like an action show with quippy characters and kind of goofy characters, cartoonish characters in the best sense. Particularly because it's an easy watch, as you talked about. They are quick episodes. It's a fairly quick season, therefore. And so, would I recommend getting a Peacock subscription solely to watch this? Probably not. But if you have Peacock or you know someone with Peacock, absolutely watch this.
Mm-hmm.
That's my recommendation.
Okay. That was good. I will say for Peacock original, this is the only original show of Peacock's that I have actually liked. I don't like any of the other ones that they've produced. So there's that. But I would give it probably like 8.5. Solid. Solid. And I usually don't like game like game to
Adaptations.
show, yeah, like game adaptations. Usually they're just terrible. Um, ugh, so
Pas
gross.
terrible. I don't know if
But
that's good French, but
I thought they did a great job for something that, for games that are literally just like about cars blowing each other up. And I was like,
Mhm.
this was really fun how they did it. And I thought it was, I mean, it's makes it an easy watch. If they were like hour-long episodes with just a ton of filler, I could see it being probably not as great. But since they're just
Yeah.
30-minute, like quick watches, I thought
Mhm.
it was well done.
Oh my god, I can't even imagine them trying to stretch these episodes into an hour.
Right, and I think they probably realized that once they started writing, they were like, you know, we
Gotta
could
break it up,
probably
yeah. Cut a
we
lot of
could
this
probably
out.
trim this down into like a shorter episodes. But
So 2 final questions before we move off. I think I know the answer to the first one because you kind of mentioned it already. The character you're looking forward to most in season 2, assuming they get it, sounds like Mr. Grimm.
yes,
What you mentioned.
it's Mr. Grimm, and well, because I loved playing him, but also in the game, he's actually like a demon creature, skeleton dude,
Mhm.
almost. So I don't know how they're gonna portray that. Um, Probably very different.
It could be like Scorpion. He's gonna take off his motorcycle helmet. It's gonna be his skull with,
Mhm,
Ishamael eyes
mhm.
burning
And also,
sockets.
I just love that he has, like, a little sidecar, like, his motorcycle has, like, a little sidecar. So I'm, like, hoping something funny happens with that situation. I don't know what, but
John Doe or Quiet's gonna end up in that sidecar in
I hope
some
so,
battle sequence
'cause I
somehow,
think that'd be
whatever.
so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Mr. Grimm would be mine. What would be yours?
If I had to choose, I would say Axel out of morbid curiosity because I just remember in the game, his appendages were hooked into giant tires, and he also was like bare chested with pants
Mhm.
on, and that was like it.
Yep.
So his
Jeans.
armor rating was very low for obvious reasons,
Yes.
and he's on the board. And there was a picture of a guy with the
Literally.
camera behind him, and it does look like he's got a bunch of those big tires in the
Yep.
foreground or the background with his arms. So he's gonna be in it, and I mean, talking about straining credulity and the absurdity of this world,
Oh
that could be
gosh.
interesting. It could be very fascinating. So that's who I'm looking forward to seeing. The other thing I wanted to ask real quickly is, it looks like based upon that wall that it's like a bracket form, like a bracketed tournament, like a March Madness thing, where it's just two drivers versus
Mhm.
each other. Whereas in the game, wasn't it like a free
Yeah.
for all? It was multiple cars. Or,
Yeah.
that's two drivers, but more than two per map.
Mhm.
So
Um,
what do you think about that? It's just kind of a duel almost. At least that's how they've seemingly set it up so far.
it kind of makes sense to me because you have to like how would you be able to tell that story fully and make it last, I guess, for a long time,
You need
you
red
know?
shirts.
Or maybe there's like my assumption is well, no, actually I don't know what my assumption is. I was trying to think through it a little bit. Like if they are facing if it's more like bracket like March Madness and they're facing off with each other and kind of dwindling it down. I don't know if they'll do that or is it like Calypso wants to do some like trimming and so he does it to get down to I don't know, like maybe the main 4 or 5 and then there's like a bigger battle sequence. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that will happen that way? I don't know. I could see that happening. Or maybe it's
Yeah.
like now I'm just like thinking of like all the possibilities. I'm like, oh, maybe. Or maybe there's it's kind of like the games where it's a few of them that are maybe like 4 or 5 of them facing off in one, and then
Hmm.
it kind of gets dwindled down to that. I don't know. Maybe they're in teams at first, who knows? Like partners to get to the end, and then they have to, like, go against each other. It will be interesting to see how they
Hmm. All I know is we talked about this on a prior podcast episode when we were talking about Twisted Metal. I need at least one of the battles to be on the top of skyscrapers somewhere.
Definitely.
Please.
And that's
I
not
beg you.
realistic, Joe. So here we go with the suspending belief and realism.
Listen, they get one suspension of belief per season. I'll give them one suspension of belief.
Skyscrapers.
If I like the suspension of belief,
is one of them. Okay. Personally, I was kind of leaning towards. I think there's like a level where it's like volcanic magma and.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Stuff. Yeah. You know, I would like to see that one with them like burning and stuff.
There's the sky's the limit. The world's their oyster. They got so many choices that they can implement here. But ultimately, yeah, like you, I hope that you get a second season because I think it would be interesting to see where they go, and it would just be interesting to see the tournament dynamic play out in this world. So, great show, good to great show. Definitely check it out if you have a Peacock subscription or you have access to someone else's Peacock subscription. Kimmer, did you recommend people get a Peacock subscription for this?
No.
Would you recommend it?
I mean, I would recommend doing maybe like I forget, maybe it's like the $4.99 option with commercials. I know you are against that. But
not the circumstances are right.
Bother me. Like that it didn't bother me at all. It was fine.
Well, and you are a big fan of The Office, so not only would you get Twisted Metal, you get The Office
and Parks and Rec.
So there's a decent catalog at Peacock, I think. But what we do need to do now is our indie bookstore shout out.
Yes.
So I turn it over to you. What you got for us?
Since I recently went to San Diego for Comic-Con, check out our video on YouTube where I show some of the swag I got. But I will shout out Verbatim Books in San Diego. It is a very cool independent bookstore. The exterior itself is super nifty. They have it painted, and on one side, one side's just like this bright teal, very eye-catching. But on the other side, they did like this whole like mural kind of thing of like books with like Stephen King and just artwork and stuff. It's very cool, the exterior. But then you go inside and it gets even cooler somehow, in that it's just very eclectic and artsy inside. Lots of art and just like fun and almost like antique looking furniture and just kind of this old bookstore vibe, but very artsy and edgy kind of feel, which I love. And then obviously the selection is fantastic.
Did you get any Buffy books while you were there?
Books. Did I get a Buffy book? I'm trying to remember. I don't think I did. I'm trying to remember what I got. I didn't get a lot because I had to, haul everything home. I think I ended up getting a Goosebump book, which is random. I know.
Well, that's what you're supposed to bring a bookcase with you, remember?
I know, but when I'm going to San Diego Comic-Con, there's other priorities ahead of, used bookstores, unfortunately.
Unbelievable.
Well, when you have a husband who needs to bring back 50 Funko Pops with him, you have to compromise.
Make him bring extra luggage. Reserve your luggage for your own swag and your used books.
Well, I primarily do. I do pretty much. But I also got free books from Comic-Con, so I can't complain much. But it is a very cool bookstore. If you're there, it's definitely worth going to. Of course, they have, Instagram is their main thing. So make sure to follow them because they're also hilarious on Instagram. They post funny like book memes and stuff. So they're fun to follow.
Sweet.
But check them out. Verbatim Books in San Diego.
Yeah. And speaking of reading, we teased at the beginning of the episode. You've moved past The Shadow Rising. You did it?
I finally did it.
And so what was on the other side?
On the other side was a couple of graphic novels. Buffy. So talking about Buffy, actually. Buffy the Vampire Slayer graphic novels.
I didn't even know you read graphic novels.
I do occasionally. I get them from the library, which is great because then you don't have to pay the obscene prices for them. But yeah, I get them from the library. And I love the Buffy the Vampire Slayer ones because they expand past the show, which is fun to read. So I read a couple of those. I read a Doctor Who short little book. And now I'm back onto one of my sexy dragon books from the Dark King series.
The sexy dragon book.
I think Passioning Nights. I think this is book 7. So, just going back. I'm just taking a little bit of a breather in between real-time books because they're so big and vast. And so I was like, I need a little bit of a mind refresh. palate cleanser, if you will, before I dive in to I think it's Fires of Heaven. Is that right?
That's book 5. Yeah, of
yes,
Wheel of Time.
book
Yeah.
5. Yeah, before I dive into that one.
Mm-hmm.
So
from the Dragon Reborn to the Sexy Dragon.
Sexy dragons.
Passion
everywhere.
ignites. So I am currently, after you decided for me, because I was torn between several different selections on my bookshelf, but one of my current second favorite series of all time is the Greenbone Saga, which is kind of a modern fantasy series that is very much in the vein of kind of like a Yakuza crime story with magic. I also get some Big Trouble in Little China vibes in there too. So I love it. It's my second favorite series by Fonda, and it's a trilogy is the main series. But she's recently come out with several short stories. So I have started the first one called The Jade Setter of Janloon. Yeah, this is actually about a 140-page little novella. And the other set, I think, are 4 short stories set in the same world. I believe they're all prequels, but I'm back in the world of the Greenbone Saga. Love it. Look forward to it. Hopefully she continues to write in that world, because it is one of the best series that has been published in recent memory, in my humble and my not so humble opinion. So there you go. I am back in the Greenbone Saga.
Lovely.
Well, yeah, and then soon we'll both be back in the Wheel of Time, because I'm trying to also reread the series as you read it for essentially the first time. And I think this is the first book now that you haven't read. You'd read the other ones in your youth, right?
Yes.
The Shadow Rising. So now you are truly in uncharted waters.
Oh, no.
So that's exciting.
I'm excited. I mean, I didn't remember like anything from when I read them back in like high school. So I didn't remember very much, other than the bare bones basics of the Wheel of Time and stuff. But so it was kind of like rereading them for the first time. But I'm really excited, because now I truly am going into uncharted waters of not knowing what will happen. So I'm very excited. Just, I have to be mentally prepared for big book, small little thing.
And because we successfully bookended now this episode with Wheel Time, probably should move on to where people can find us if they're so inclined to continue listening to, watching our content.
Yes. Well, you should check us out on YouTube, because we not only do the podcast, but you've really been doing a lot of like book reviews, and I've actually done a couple videos now. We reviewed the first book, speaking of Wheel of Time again.
Yeah.
The Eye of the World. We did a book review of that.
We're planning to review the show.
Yes,
when it debuts.
Planning on reviewing the show, so definitely check out the YouTube, the Pop Docs, and then we're also on Instagram at the Pop Docs Pod, and Twitter, or X. I don't know what we call it nowadays, but whatever that channel is, Twitter X Twitter.
X Twitter is like perfect.
Pop Docs, yeah,
because it's both. It is X Twitter, but it's also X Twitter. There you go. I like that.
Yes. So there we are. Come follow, chat.
Yeah.
Join us.
And for those that listen, like, subscribe, comment, start discourse. Thank you for listening and watching. And hopefully you'll continue to listen and watch. But for this episode of the Pop Docs podcast, our clinic is officially closed.
Doodles.